Your audio is quite loud. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for showing up on time. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes for folks to join here. That way I'm not being interrupted as I'm talking.
I'll start for 20 minutes too.
Mute. All right, we muted everyone. All right, we'll give it. Excuse me. We'll give it one more minute, and then we will get rolling. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, someone just give me a verbal yes that you can see what's on the screen here.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Perfect. All right, let's get rolling. So thank you all for joining here. Obviously, you're here because you may have an athlete or maybe yourself looking to gain some weight here this off season. So we're going to be diving into that here tonight. All right. So let's get started. So quick poll, if we can find the chat here on your phone. What I'd like you to do, I will go through each of these individually, but type yes if right now your athlete or yourself is doing weightlifting or some type of strength and conditioning program. Okay, a lot of yeses. Very good. That's expected. And then as far as, thank you, as far as diet, right? So again, everyone's here for weight gain. Who here has been increasing protein intake, whether it's through shakes or portions at meals? Just type a yes if that's the case. Okay. A lot of yeses. All right. And then how about lastly, just type a yes if your athlete is currently using creatine. Okay, a couple no's, a couple yeses. All right. Yes to protein. Okay. No to creatine. Okay, very good. All right. So yeah, the reason I put those three on there is because that's like the most common. I get a couple screenshots here in a minute, but like those are the three most common things that athletes, doesn't matter if they're a basketball athlete, baseball athlete, football athlete, whatever, athletes in general try to do from a weight gain perspective is doing these three things. Lifting, I got to eat more protein, and then 9 times out of 10, they're taking creatine, right? And as you'll see here on my next slide, right, like that doesn't always work, right? Like I talk to literally hundreds of athletes every single month, parents every single month, whose like son struggles with weight gain, and pretty much 9 times out of 10 they're doing those three things, right? Like we got here, eating as much as possible, eating a lot of protein, going to the gym, drinking protein, or haven't gained any weight, taking creatine, protein, lifting, right? It's the same story over and over again. And that's because, as we'll talk about here today, right, like that's not really a truly strategy from a weight gain perspective, because there's a lot of things that we're missing, especially fueling basketball athletes, that we want to kind of tighten up so that we actually get good results. All right. So I don't know, some of you may have been following me for a while on social media. Some of you maybe just this week, or you saw an ad or something for this workshop. Right, so just a little bit about me. So my name is Tim DeLeo. I'm the director of sport nutrition at the University of Connecticut, and I've worked in Division I basketball for about 11 years now. So really high level players, guys who have gone on to play in the NBA. Steph Castle in the NBA Finals right now, former UConn alum, and I also play basketball myself. So I don't say that to like brag by any means, but just to put that out there that I work with some of the literally some of the best basketball athletes in the country. And from a nutrition standpoint, we're doing a lot more for them than just, hey, here's a meal plan. Hey, here's how much protein you got to eat, right? Like there's a million places you can find that information online, ChatGPT, whatever. But really what we're talking about here today is fueling and optimizing performance, energy, recovery, injury prevention, and then that subsequently can also lead to solid weight gain and muscle gain that translates to the court, as opposed to just chasing a number on the scale that ultimately is going to maybe hurt performance or increase the risk of injury for your athlete. All right. So right now, right, there's a good chance that if you're on the call tonight, you might be feeling some of these, right, in terms of frustrated because you feel like you're doing everything, right? You're doing the lifting, we're doing more protein, we're eating quote unquote more, but not really seeing significant progress on the scale. There's a lot of stuff on social media about nutrition. Everyone has their opinions, right? A lot of misinformation on social media, so it's very overwhelming from all that nutrition noise and trying to like figure out what's legit and what isn't, and like where to even begin, right? So like that certainly is a feeling that a lot of parents experience, trying to figure out how to help their son, or worse, right? Like worried that ultimately, like if your son doesn't put on the weight that they need, right, 10, 15, 20 pounds, like that's potentially they're missing out on opportunities to make the varsity team or get a college scout looking at them, get that next opportunity, get more playing time, whatever it is, potentially going to miss out just because they're undersized, right? And like I've been in the back room of recruiting meetings with coaching staffs, and like the eye test is definitely like that's the first impression that your athlete can give to a college coach, whether it's in the live period or in high school ball, whatever. Like certainly the skill set is part of that. But if a coach, especially nowadays with how much they're paying these players at all levels, if a coach sees a player and they're not physically ready or in their mind to be able to contribute on the court that next season, then they might be looking for another athlete, right? Because there's just not a lot of time to develop these players at the certain levels of basketball, like there was, maybe just a few years ago before they started paying these guys a lot of money. They need to win, and the coaches' jobs and livelihoods are tied to wins. So we need guys who can contribute right away, not who are going to spend time with me and the strength coach, for a year and a half to get physically ready to contribute. All right. And this is just one example, right? Like Rick Pitino, St. John's, he had this quote, I think it was last fall, just saying that, at this point in especially high level college basketball, it's really hard to win with high school kids, as opposed to going to the portal, going to getting international players. You got coaches pulling guys from the G League and JUCOs, right? Like guys that are experienced college level players and are physically ready and developed. Like that is what a lot of these coaches are going to be moving towards, which makes it even more difficult for high school players to get noticed and get some of these offers and roster spots. So the goal is to eliminate as many excuses that a coach could give a player for why they're not going to recruit them, right? Because I've had several players that I work with over the years who a coach told them from the get-go, like, hey, we love your skill set, we love your game, really think that's going to translate to the next level, but you got to get in the weight room, but you got to put on weight, as you'll see with one of my athlete examples here in a minute. So we want to eliminate that excuse. And then in terms of, ultimately what is being undersized costing your athlete, it comes in a multitude of different areas, right? Whether that's like immediate impact, right? Like making the team, getting playing time, having confidence, or getting noticed during the live period in July, or getting noticed for fall AAU, or whatever the case may be. Significant, career and financial opportunities, right? D3, D2 is still a great opportunity for a lot of athletes. I have several players that I work with who are overseas making a lot of money playing basketball for their career who were D3 players, right? Like when I played Division III ball, like avenues like that to play overseas at a high level just really weren't even on the table. So basketball has exploded across the world, and there's just a lot more opportunities for players to obviously play in college, but continue their careers even beyond that, and, make a significant amount of money, just playing the sport that they love. Right. And then lastly, health and performance risk. So again, if you got a guy who's 6'4", $150, $140, like that person's going to be at a significantly higher risk of injury versus that same player with an extra 15 to 20 pounds of solid weight. A good example of that is Chet Holmgren from the Thunder, the Oklahoma City Thunder. So his rookie year, super skinny dude. He's still kind of a skinny dude, but he's put on some weight. But rookie year, went up to block a shot, fell, landed on his hip, broken hip, right? Because he's super skinny. He's got no protection, no armor, nothing to really prevent that from happening versus, a player who's a little bit more muscular, a little bit more physically developed, probably just has a bad bone bruise or is really sore the next day as opposed to like a total hip fracture that put him out for a significant period of time, right? So we want to optimize, obviously, all of these opportunities, but as well as career longevity and being able to stay on the court. All right, so ultimately, like we're gonna talk through how exactly to gain weight, doing it the right way, and kind of overcoming some of the blocks that are probably existent for many of your athletes right now. So we'll just kind of dive into a few of the weight gain myths and lies that I hear a lot from parents and athletes themselves, or maybe a better term for that is like some of the excuses that athletes will throw out for why they can't gain weight. We'll talk through like what it truly takes to prepare the body for weight gain, right? There's a process to that. And then ultimately, how do we gain weight without losing athleticism? How do we gain weight to optimize basketball performance as opposed to slowing us down and making us more injury prone? All right. So just a quick little tidbit about me to kind of show you where I'm coming from. So I was like in this exact situation. This is why I'm pretty passionate about working with basketball players and working with athletes specifically who need to put on weight and put on size to contribute in basketball, because I was in their shoes a long time ago when I played college ball, right? I weighed 6 foot, almost 6'1". I was 163 pounds heading into my freshman year of college, really no muscle mass, because they told us in high school, this was a long time ago, not to lift weights because it was going to throw off your shot and you didn't want to become a football player, right? So never lifted a weight until I got to college, super skinny, undersized, was playing against 22, 23, 24-year-olds who had 30, 40 pounds of me, and I was just at a huge disadvantage. And that was the first conversation my coach had with me was, hey, if you want to get minutes next season going into sophomore year, like, you're going to have to put on weight, you're going to put on some size so that way you can actually handle the physicality of this level. Because, it was certainly a wake-up call for me that it was a lot different than high school, a lot different than AAU, right? So I just did pretty much whatever I could to try to put on the weight. It was just like, I know I need to lift weights. I know I need to eat more, right? Whatever more means in order to put on weight. Didn't really have a strategy or a system or any kind of knowledge around how to do that. And so I just ate a ton, right? I was filling my face. Didn't matter what I was eating. It was just the goal was to get calories so I could put on weight and see the number on the scale go up, right? And I was successful in gaining weight. But I gained a lot of unhealthy body fat weight because I didn't really know what the heck I was doing and was just eating way too much for what I actually needed. Right, I got a little bit stronger because I was lifting as well, but ultimately it hurt my basketball performance because of what I did to my body without really even knowing it, right? So that took me almost 2 years to go from that state of being like a mess physically to then figuring it out and being able to actually contribute, build the muscle that I wanted to, put my body in a place where I could be successful on the basketball court. But within that time, right, like self-confidence certainly took a hit. because I just was having a hard time putting on the size. Certainly considered quitting basketball because I wasn't playing a lot and just couldn't figure out, how to put on weight the right way. But I'm glad, obviously, that I didn't. But ultimately, right, like my mission is to help athletes who are in that exact same spot as me not go through that pain of struggling for 2 years to put on good size and miss out on essentially 2 years of college basketball because I just wasn't physically prepared. And obviously that's what I do with with our guys, with my D1 guys that I work with, my pro guys, is just physically getting them ready so they can have maximum career longevity and they can ultimately leave the sport on their terms as opposed to that being dictated for them. All right, so just a quick kind of dive into some myths and lies that a lot of parents and athletes tell themselves around why they can't gain weight or maybe what they think they need to do to gain weight. So myth number one is the just eat more, which is really vague advice. It's not very helpful, right? They'll be like saying, hey, I want to be a better basketball player. What do I have to do? Oh, just go play more basketball or just go shoot more, right? It's like, that's really not helpful. It's like, yeah, it's true. Like, yeah, I probably do need to do that. But like, what specifically, what tactically do I need to do to see the result that I want? So eat more really fails the athletes in a lot of ways. Because ultimately we don't know how much more is more, right? A guy who needs to gain 20 pounds versus a guy who only needs to gain 5, right? More might look different for each of those athletes. Or an athlete who's training 5 hours a day versus an athlete who's maybe only training 2 hours a day. Again, more is going to be very different for each of those athletes. So it's just not good advice. And then it's like, okay, what do I do to eat more, right? Is it a lot of athletes will lean toward protein shakes because they think more protein means more muscle. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Does it mean another meal or maybe another 2 meals, right? Or should I be eating more protein? Should I be eating more carbs, right? There's a lot of like confusion and just trial and error and guesswork when eat more is the strategy. And ultimately, right, because we're guessing, that leads to really inconsistent progress. So guys will gain a little bit of weight, then they might lose it, or guys will gain a little bit of weight and then kind of like plateau, and then weight doesn't change for several months, right? Because there's really no system in place. We're just kind of like throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that, we see the result on the scale without having a structured system. The other downside to that, right, is this is exactly what I did, was just eat more. And again, if you're significantly overfeeding yourself or your athlete, like your body can only genetically build so much muscle in a given time. And if we're going way above and beyond that without even knowing it, then that's going to contribute a lot to extra body fat gain, which is definitely not going to help us on the court from a performance standpoint. So, right, we're not football linemen where we can afford to gain, 5 to 15 pounds of body fat, and it's really not an issue because the goal is just to have mass. Like basketball, you need to be able to jump and explode and change the direction. There's a lot of athleticism required for that having a ton of body fat is not beneficial for. All right, myth number 2, and I hear this one a lot. I'd probably be a billionaire if I had $1 for every time I heard this, right? Like, oh, he just has a fast metabolism. And that couldn't be couldn't be further from the truth. We'll kind of walk through what that means here in a second, right? Because ultimately, right, it's like, how fast is fast, right? We don't really know. Like, how fast is your metabolism? It could be different from person to person. What I find is that from talking with athletes, most basketball players are under eating by about 800 to 1,200 calories per day. Right. So if you're under eating by that much, which is pretty significant for athletes who are training at a high level, then really it has nothing to do with your metabolism. It has to do that we're not providing the body with enough fuel for whatever your activity is. But if we know that, right, if we can measure and assess the metabolism, then we can plan nutrition effectively, right? So for example, we have a 6'2" guard who weighs 170 pounds, right? Like their metabolic rate for survival, just based on height and weight alone, is the same, regardless of how active they are. If they're just sitting around all day, they're moderately active or very active. What their body needs to survive is based on their height, weight, and muscle mass. Right now, we add on how much they're training, how many calories are we burning through training, right? And that's going to dictate what their metabolic rate is, right? So the same exact athlete who's sedentary, so not moving around a ton, has a metabolic rate of 2,200 calories. That same athlete who now is training 2, 3, 4 hours a day, right, is very active. They're burning significantly more energy from their training. So now their metabolic rate is 3,400 calories, right? So weight gain for this person down here who's sedentary is going to be a lot different than weight gain for this person down here who's very active in terms of how much they need to eat. So the point is, a lot of athletes have no clue what their metabolic rate is. So then if that's the case, there's no way we can possibly plan nutrition appropriately. Because if I know what your metabolic rate is, I can say, hey, your metabolic rate is 2,600 calories. We need 3,100 calories. This is how we're going to do it. Right? And that athlete will now gain weight. Has nothing to do with their fast metabolism. Just has to do with they don't really know how to eat for how active they are. Myth number 3 is that athletes he'll grow just by lifting more, right? Guys are in the weight room all summer long, 4 or 5 days, 6 days a week, sometimes 2 workouts, 2 training or weightlifting workouts in a day, right? Because more lifting is going to make me grow faster, which again is not the case. A lot of you, like you said, you typed in yes, that we are already lifting, yet you or your athlete is struggling with size and weight on the scale, right? So lifting doesn't necessarily equal results on the scale from a weight standpoint. Certainly will increase strength, but strength does not always increase size, right? And ultimately, right, because there's a mismatch between the 2 most important things that an athlete needs to see changes in muscle mass, changes in body weight. And those 2 things are food, which is obviously why we're on the call today to talk about food, and then the weightlifting, right? So if we're trying to put an addition onto a house, the food would be the building blocks, right? The wood, the brick, the cement, so on and so forth. That's the raw materials that we need to build the addition. And then the lifting is the tools, right? The saw, the hammer, the nails, all that stuff that we're now piecing it all together. So if we have one or the other, then we're not going to get the result that we want, right? So if we're just lifting and we're not eating enough, the number on the scale is not going to move. In fact, I've seen athletes lift a ton and actually lose muscle mass because of how poor they're eating. And on the flip side, if we're just eating and then not training in the weight room, then we have a lot of extra energy that's not going to be used to build muscle because we're not lifting. So that person is just going to gain a lot of extra body fat, right? So we need to have both of these working in tandem to get the best results. So ultimately, what actually drives muscle growth and weight gain? Like, what are the 3 most important things that need to happen? Are these here, right? So number 1 is lifting consistently, right? 3 to 5 times a week is really all it takes. Our guys at UConn, lift 4 days a week, sometimes 5 as the summer progresses. It's not an everyday thing. It's just providing enough of a stimulus to kick the body into like protein synthesis and muscle building mode. All right, but that really only contributes about 15 to 20% of the end goal result, which is weight gain and size. Right, really 70 to 75, maybe even 80% of that goal is going to come from eating in a calorie surplus. So eating more than what your metabolic rate is, so your body has extra building blocks to then start putting on that addition, right? And then lastly is sleep. A lot of research, a lot of studies being done in athletes showing that if you have poor sleep, your muscle mass progress is significantly inhibited. Obviously, performance is going to be impacted negatively as well. So we need to ensure that we're getting at least 8 hours of sleep when we're trying to grow. But really the problem here, right, is athletes kind of flip number 1 and number 2, to where they're putting 80 to 90, maybe 95% of their effort into the lifting program that they're doing, when that's only going to give them 15 to 20% of the result. And then the food piece really gets overlooked by a lot of families and athletes And maybe it's like in their mind 15 to 20%. But it's like this is where we need to be putting a lot of time and attention, is into that 70 to 75%, because that is what's going to start moving the needle from a obviously energy standpoint, fueling standpoint, as well as muscle size and strength, right? And even when we do that, right, we're going to see even better results in the weight room, because now we have a lot more energy, we're much more well hydrated. There's a lot of factors that are going to trickle into the weight room to lift even more weight, to get even stronger, to get even bigger, right? So it kind of just snowballs on itself. But that being said, right, like many athletes do that, where they're lifting, they're eating more supposedly than what they actually are burning with all their training they're doing. They're doing the sleep, but they still don't see much results, right? And ultimately that's because their bodies, from a physiological standpoint, aren't really primed for growth, right? Like the body has to be prepared for that. We can't just start shoving food and calories in the body and say, hey, grow, and it's going to happen. It's just not how it works. So one example of this, right, is like your body's or your athlete's body ability to take food, break it down into, protein, carbs, fats, usable energy, to then shuttle that to muscle protein building, energy production, a little bit of body fat storage is typical when we have weight gain. But this process is really efficient when there's an appropriate amount of food coming in the body. So right now, all of your athletes are eating a certain amount. This process is typically moving very efficiently. Now, if we just start, what's happening here? My thing froze here. What happened? Oh, there we go. Let me go back here. There we go. Okay. If we just start cramming food down, right, like eating quote unquote more, or drinking a ton more protein shakes, or using masking powders, right, there's a significantly higher intake of food than what was previously being done, right? Like the body is just not prepared to handle that, right? From a digestive standpoint, being able to break down that food, being able to absorb all that extra food, convert that food into usable energy. There's a lot of bottlenecks that start to pop up when we just start like force feeding calories for growth, right? And then second to that is just the overall digestive process and ability to absorb food that you're eating and convert that into energy, right? Because we can be eating a lot of food, but if the body is not converting that to energy, then that's like the raw materials for the house aren't actually being delivered, right? They're stuck in the warehouse. And poor diet across the board can contribute to that, right? So a lot of athletes, young athletes especially, will eat a lot of fried food or just fast food in general, ultra processed foods like your Pop-Tarts and things like that, candy. They don't, especially my male athletes, right? Like they typically don't eat a lot of fruit, veggies, or just fiber in general. Lack of probiotics, so like healthy bacteria in certain foods like yogurt that help to digest and process food, or athletes that are eating just an excessive amount of protein. That's going to slow down a lot of things from a digestive standpoint that we definitely do not want to do when the goal, or we don't want to have happen when the goal is weight gain, right? So all of these kind of contributing factors are things that we want to correct through the diet to be able to set the body up for success, to absorb and then use those building blocks for growth. All right. And when we have these things present, obviously the body is not able to do that. Right. So in both of those scenarios where we have certain bottlenecks from a digestive standpoint, from a vitamin and mineral standpoint, we have digestive issues from absorption and then fuel utilization in the body. Like that's an athlete, right, who's eating like supposedly enough calories, or they're eating more calories, they're eating more protein. And in their mind, it's like that is what it takes to then translate to muscle growth. But that doesn't happen because there's those bottlenecks there that are present, preventing that energy from being absorbed, from being converted to usable energy for their muscles and for growth. Right. So ultimately, like, how do we kind of, overcome those particular challenges and ensure that we are setting the body up for success, for growth? especially in this critical window of, you know, off season for basketball players. Really, for most guys, right? It's like this time of year, June through maybe October, November. So that's 5, maybe 6 months. Not a lot of time to be able to put on significant weight, especially if it's 15 to 20 pounds. So it's like, how do we get the results and set the body up for success as quickly as possible? All right, so we'll talk about that here now. All right, so we got 3 steps ultimately to do that. So step number 1 is we have to fix the gut, which is the digestive tract, to be able to set that up to digest and metabolize and absorb food efficiently, right? So this is the delivery mechanism. So we're eating more food, my body can process the food, and now I'm absorbing it efficiently, right? And we're converting that to usable energy. So 4 kind of buckets that we prioritize in order to fix the digestive tract and set that up for success is probiotics, like I mentioned, whether that's in the form of supplementation or just probiotics in foods like yogurt, kefir, other things like that. Digestive enzymes, right? So these are things that we would take typically in the supplementation form that help to break down protein, help to break down carbs and fats to make it easier on the body to then absorb that fuel as opposed to trying to do it all on itself. Prebiotics, which is just kind of a fancy term for fiber, right? So foods like oats and berries and certain vegetables will have prebiotic fiber, which is food for this healthy bacteria, right? So we can kind of like essentially make this positive feedback loop where we have good bacteria coming in to help with digestion. We're also providing food for that bacteria to grow and flourish. And then we're able to actually digest the food and absorb it the right way, right? And then on top of that, eating foods like fast food, fried food, ultra processed foods, those are going to create an inflammatory state within the digestive tract itself, right? And the more inflammation we have, the harder it is for the stomach and intestines to function optimally, right? So we need to introduce more anti-inflammatory foods. So that would be things like fish, omega-3 supplementation. Berries are kind of a great antioxidant-rich food. We use supplements like turmeric or curcumin to help with that inflammatory status inside the digestive tract to set it up for ultimate digestion and absorption. All right. So that's step number 1. Yeah, I see your question, Clyde. We'll get to that in a second. So yeah, hang on tight. Good question. Step number 2, right, is going to be fixing the energy metabolism, right? So the ability to now take that food that we just digested and then be able to convert that into usable energy, not only for weight gain and muscle building, but also for basketball performance, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, is to create a very high power, optimal and efficient athlete. So to correct those things, right, there is going to be certain like micronutrient and metabolic gaps that are unique to each athlete, depending on their genetics, their current diet, their training, their sweat rate, their sleep, a lot of factors, right? But these are gaps that ultimately prevent the food that they're eating to become that usable fuel, right? So that's the example I gave where it's like athletes eating in a calorie surplus, right? Oh, I'm eating 4,500 calories a day. I'm not gaining weight. It's like, yeah, we probably have a lot of metabolic gaps there that your body needs to actually utilize that fuel in an efficient way to grow, right? So I do a lot of this metabolic analysis on athletes, and these are the most common trends that I see in terms of where the gaps fall into, right? So the first one is going to be B vitamins. There are a multitude of B vitamins. Probably the most common one that you all hear of is B12, because a lot of like clinics and spas would do like B12 IVs and things like that. Anyways, B vitamins are essential for converting the food that you eat, protein, carbs, and fats, metabolizing that, and then turning that into energy, especially when you start exercising. And because athletes exercise significantly more than, someone like me, their requirement for certain B vitamins and these other things here is much higher than the average person, right? So we need to know, hey, where are these gaps and how can we optimize your body to be able to break down and digest that fuel efficiently? So B vitamins we want to look into, magnesium as well. This often gets promoted a lot just for sleep, like helping athletes sleep and relax at night, which really like undercuts the impact of magnesium. There's a lot of roles that it plays in terms of muscle tightness, cramping, certainly energy production as well. So we don't want to overlook magnesium. And oftentimes what I see is when athletes are training significantly, they need about 4 to 5 times as much magnesium as like their baseline when they're like, for our guys, like having a break during May, right? So 4 to 5 times as much magnesium. Most athletes fall well short of even their baseline to begin with from a diet standpoint. And then lastly, these two antioxidants, this is CoQ10, as well as alpha lipoic acid, ALA. So those are really going to be essential for breaking down the carb foods that you're eating. So rice, potatoes, pasta, fruits, quinoa, sweet potatoes, those types of things, breaking those types of foods down and allowing that to be used as energy for performance, and also contributing to muscle building. Right. So if any of these things are off, right, then it's an inefficient engine, right? Like we might be putting a ton of gas into the tank, but then it gets to the engine and it's just like sputtering, right? Because there's all these kind of gaps and leaks that are going on. So we want to tighten that up. And then lastly, it is 4 steps. I just kind of combined it into 3 and 4. But ultimately, right, the goal for weight gain is to go slow and I say like eat like a BA, right? So not a badass, but a basketball athlete, right? So what does that even mean? Right. Ultimately, weight gain is a marathon, not a sprint. So making some of these changes, increasing calories slowly over time, right? And what I consider to be slowly is a 200 to 400 calorie surplus for about 10 to 14 days before increasing that, right? So it's a gradual increase in how much we're overfeeding an athlete, because the goal is not to overtax the system that we just fixed, right? A lot of guys and parents get really impatient when it comes to weight gain progress. And it's like, oh, my son's going to gain 10 pounds in 2 months, or it's September and he's going to put on 15 pounds before the start of the season. Like that's just not realistic when we're talking about good quality weight and high performance. You can definitely do it. I know a lot of people that have put on that amount of weight. I mean, the freshman 15, like most freshmen will put on 15 pounds within the first semester of college, but that's not good quality weight, right? There's a certain maximum to how much muscle can actually be built in a given period of time, and anything above and beyond that, again, is going to tax that internal system that we just fixed, as well as result in a lot of unhealthy weight. So I like to shoot for 0.5 pound to 1 pound per week as a good rate of weight gain, and as long as we're staying within that, then we're on track. All right, and we just keep chugging along. And then lastly, right, like basketball players have unique demands compared to other types of athletes. And this is again where like the just eat more recommendation or just drink more protein shakes, like that really falls short from getting the results that we want and building the best basketball player, the best version of themselves, because it's not accounting for what their bodies need. Right. So like for basketball players, depending on the time of season that they're in, really carbs. So rice, pasta, potatoes, fruit, like that should be making up the majority of their diet, right? 50 to 60 or more % of their diet, depending on when they're playing and what they're doing training wise. About 20% is protein, 20 to 30% is fat, right? A lot of parents and athletes have this flipped where it's like 50 to 60% of the diet is protein, maybe 30 to 40 is carbs, and then the remaining is fats, right? So like that, as you'll see here in a second, like that's really eating more like a fitness influencer or a bodybuilder, not really as a basketball athlete who is running several miles a day within the confines of a practice or a workout. And they have a much higher carbohydrate requirement than other types of athletes. Right. So a football player, right, is a little bit different depending on the position that they play. Right. We can have a little bit less carbs for that type of athlete because there's ultimately less overall movement on a football field. I think I saw something recently. Fox put out a stat saying that like during a 4-hour NFL broadcast, there's only a accumulation of 17 minutes of actual football gameplay, right? So that compare that to basketball, which is significantly higher than that. On top of the fact that football players traditionally only play one side of the field, whereas basketball, you're expected to play both ends of the court. So just a completely different demand. But they can eat higher protein, a little bit lower carb, and get away with it just because of the demands of their sport. And then we have like fitness influencers, bodybuilders, things like that, where they're not training like a basketball athlete. They're not running for 3-4 hours a day, having really intense practices. They're in the gym for an hour, maybe hour and a half, and it's not a significant like carb burn for the type of training they're doing. So yeah, they can eat super high protein, low carb, or keto, or whatever carnivore type diets because again, their body just needs something completely different, and that's just not going to be appropriate for a basketball player. All right, so ultimately, those are the 3 steps. On top of like really what I talked about in the beginning is like identifying like what is the athlete's metabolic rate, and then how do we plan nutrition appropriately. That's really step number 1. Step number 2 is, or the next phase, I guess, is fixing the gut, fixing the energy metabolism, fixing those things that are off within the body to make that engine more efficient. And then lastly, eating like a basketball athlete, planning the meals and snacks appropriately for what they need specifically, and then setting realistic expectations of what that weight gain target and goal should look like. All right. So ultimately, if we do those things, then we're going to get the top tier goal, which is what we all want, which is good, healthy weight gain and muscle growth. We're going to get that, but we're also going to get a lot of positive impact in other areas for them as basketball players, meaning more energy and stamina during practices, workouts, games, AAU weekends, if they're in high school. We're going to get stronger in the weight room, right? Because now we actually have fuel that can be used at a high level. Faster recovery, so less muscle soreness, less tightness, just being able to like push themselves harder day after day, as opposed to athletes who aren't really optimizing nutrition and they kind of fade out as the days of accumulating fatigue start stacking up. Better sleep, athletes who are eating the right way and have the right types of nutrition for their body get better quality of sleep, better length of sleep, more restorative sleep, which ultimately is the number 1 recovery tool for athletes. So we want to do whatever we can to possibly maximize that. And then certainly a reduced risk of injury because we've optimized all of these areas. Typically when athletes under fuel, that's when they set themselves up for injury, right? There's slower processing, mechanics start breaking down, they start getting lazy later into games. And that's when, they plant a certain way that they wouldn't, or they are lazy and go off of 1 foot instead of 2, or they're slow getting after a ball and they get hit. There's a lot of things that can kind of stack on top of each other when we're under fueled that would then lead to increased risk of injury, whether that's a contact injury or soft tissue injury with bone, ligaments, tendons, and so forth. All right. So just a few kind of examples here in terms of athletes that I work with that we've been able to implement this with, who have had really great success that's translated to getting some great opportunities at the college level. So this particular athlete, Diego, right, when I started working with him and his dad, he was about 150 pounds. He played at one of the top prep schools in the country, was getting a lot of attention from college coaches, but ultimately his size was holding him back. He's 6'2", 150. Like that's not a college guard size. So they kept telling him, yeah, like we like your game, but you got to get in the weight room. You got to get in the weight room. And this kid was training a lot. His dad had hired like a really top tier strength coach, but just wasn't seeing any movement on the scale simply because the food piece, the metabolic piece just wasn't dialed in. Right. So we fixed that. And then he put on 20 pounds in 6 months. And as I put here, like got a D1 offer. You can see the transformation, just how like skinny he was in April of last year to August. And now he's committed to go to Air Force, pretty good NIL package, going to play at a D1 school. So great opportunity there that wasn't really on the table for him prior to gaining that weight. All right. Aiden, same kind of deal, right? Lifting a ton, taking creatine, drinking the protein shakes, the typical trifecta. Again, not seeing any movement on the scale. We were able to, again, fix those things, internal bottlenecks for him, get a really structured nutrition plan in place, 20 pounds in 5 months. So just goes to show, like, when we have these things in place and we're fixing the body to be able to prepare it for weight gain, like, the results come pretty quick, right? Because the body is like, I wouldn't say wanting to gain weight, but like when we have everything kind of lined up, it just makes it very easy for growth to happen, as opposed to trying to like fight against your biology. All right. And just some other examples of athletes I work with, who obviously seen a lot of results. And with my athletes, right, I guarantee the result ultimately. So I'm 485 for 485 in terms of athletes hitting their weight gain goals. So ultimately, right, if nothing changes for your athlete, something will change for another athlete, right? Like, another player will develop and put on size this summer. They will earn a spot on team or earn more minutes because they've changed physically, right? There's potentially another year of missed opportunities, like Diego or Aiden, right? They were seniors going into their senior year, had 3 potential years of missed opportunities before finally getting it right. So obviously nothing changes unless what's preventing the progress changes, right? So I'm sure a lot of you, right, are going to start working on these things immediately. Some of you are probably already Googling or chat GPTing some of the things I've been talking about today, trying to put together a plan. And some of you just might feel super overwhelmed just in terms of like really what has to happen from a structure standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, to get weight gain going in the right direction and to maintain that even once we do gain the weight, so they don't lose it during the season, right? So if you feel like that, just in terms of, hey, this is hitting me like a fire hose, right? Like, there certainly is opportunities. I do work with a few athletes at a given time on this particular goal. And I'll just share a brief little spiel about that before we get into the questions here. So that's my program. I call it Build Your Armor, right? We're building up the armor of the athlete, not only from an external standpoint, but also internal resilience with their biology as well. Right. So I don't do just like PDF meal plans and stuff like that for the athletes I work with, because ultimately you can get that anywhere, and that's not really individualized to the athlete, and that's not fixing those metabolic problems in step 1 and step 2 that we just kind of went over, right? So ultimately those are losing strategies, right? But for me, like, this program is exactly what I do with my high-level D1 and pro guys, looking at the metabolism and then building performance nutrition for the athlete as a basketball player. All right. So in terms of what I do with athletes, right, a component of that is identifying those bottlenecks and gaps within their body. So like, we have to test for that. There's no way to, just like look at an athlete and say, hey, this is wrong with you, right? Or, hey, I think you need more of this, right? Part of that is looking at the diet and what they're doing right now. But really what we do is metabolic testing through the blood work to identify where those things are and then what needs to change to get everything moving in the right direction. From a gut standpoint, like I mentioned, like the probiotics, certain anti-inflammatory properties, other kind of like gut fuel, we'll do that to prime the digestive tract to get them ready for actual growth. And then once we have these 2 things in place, right, like we set the body up for digestion, we've fixed all those internal metabolic gaps, then we can start to individualize the nutrition plan specific to their food preferences, their training, practice, whatever they have going on, to ensure that we're hitting that 0.5 pound to 1 pound per week rate of weight gain. And then ultimately, like, there's a reason I only take on a few athletes at a given time. Obviously, I'm working at a high level with my university guys, my UConn guys. So like, I pour a lot into my athletes and I want them to get a great experience and to get results. So I just physically can't work with every single person that reaches out to me. So I'm very particular about the type of athlete and who I work with for that reason, as much as I would love to help everyone. And then ultimately, because again, all my athletes have hit their weight gain goals, I do have a guarantee for anyone that does work with me where if you and your athlete are putting in the work, then I guarantee the result, right? Because I know my program works. I know like what I do for athletes from a metabolic standpoint works. So if you just follow the plan, then we're going to get results. And if for whatever reason you're a unicorn and it just for whatever reason takes a little bit longer than expected, right? Then I keep working with those athletes at no charge at all until they do hit their goal, because ultimately I want to set them up for the most success. This isn't just about me, having a payday. It's about setting the athlete up for success, helping them achieve their goals, and hopefully getting them to the next level, whatever that might mean for them, whether it's high school, college, pro, and so forth. All right. So ultimately, again, from a weight gain standpoint, certainly a lot of information here to kind of digest, take home with you. You can continue to do this on your own, which is exactly what I did years ago. Potentially risk this off-season window, or we can skip all that, right, and kind of partner up together and make this happen here at this off-season. So as a bonus for joining the call and registering for my talk tonight, I'm offering a free weight gain audit for any athlete or parent, right? So the goal of this is to take a deep dive into what we're doing for training, what we're doing for nutrition, identify what some of those bottlenecks could be, and then build out a roadmap for, hey, how do we get you from point A to point B for your weight gain goals this off season, right? This call is not a sales call. There'll be no exchange of money. It's really just for me to get to know the athlete and see, what we might be able to do to help them out. All right. So for this particular audit, right, I'll drop my calendar invite here in the chat, as well as when I send out the recording, it'll be there. We don't have to have the call by Friday, right? But you at least have to be on my schedule, even if it's for next week. Just please be on it by Friday. That way we can be efficient and really get to work for this off-season period. All right. So with that said, let me stop my share and then we'll open it up for questions for you all. So I'm sure you guys have quite a few questions here. Oh, where do we go? There we go. Okay. Dismiss. All right, so Clyde, I know there was a question that you had about the probiotics. Let me find my chat here. Oh, it's over here. Here we go. Okay. Prebiotic and probiotic gummies. Yeah, so I mean, I'm more in favor of the prebiotic gummies because typically those are dosed pretty well in terms of like what they actually contain. The probiotic gummies, it's really going to depend on the brand. A lot of probiotic gummies just really don't fix the issue, right? Like they're anywhere from like 1 to 5 billion CFUs typically, which is pretty low. Typically with my athletes, like we're doing up to 20 billion CFU at a given time to optimize digestion from a probiotic standpoint. So it really depends on the brand. I personally have not seen a good quality probiotic gummy that has that much. From a probiotic standpoint, typically I go with the pill route, but that's not to say those products don't exist. I just don't know about them. Goalie, yeah, again, that may have it. I don't know, like specifically that brand, like what their CFUs is going to be. And it also depends too, like the strain of bacteria that's in the probiotic. That's going to differ wildly. So like the probiotic that I recommend is through Thorne. That's pretty much most of the supplements that I use, but Thorne probiotic has several different strains of bacteria that are commonly found in the digestive tract, as opposed to like a lot of probiotics we just have one type of bacteria strain. So that was a good question. Anyone else questions? You can either drop it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself.
I had a question similar to about the probiotics and that. As far as like magnesium, like are you recommending like supplements like pills for all those? Try to get it from food mostly or the supplements and the food both? Or is there like a recommendation you have on those things?
Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. It really does depend on the athlete, and like what they're doing from a training standpoint. So just to kind of give you a reference example, like right now for like most of my athletes in like their off season period, magnesium utilization is pretty low. So a lot of times, like, about 300 to 400 milligrams is like the typical like daily value for most people. That can really be easily achieved through food alone. Now, if there is, of course, like food preferences of the athlete or allergies or things that prevents us from getting it through food, then certainly we would have to lean more on the supplement. But in general, it can be tackled through food. But then as training starts to ramp up, right, like there's more magnesium being utilized. Like I said, like it could be 4 to 5 times as much as what they might be using today in June. So like that's just going to be really hard to get from food alone. So we'd have to introduce supplements there.
Great. No, thank you. Thanks for that.
Yep, you're welcome. Cool. Anyone else?
If I didn't want to take up all the time, but I would be interested to hear what you have to say about creatine.
Yeah, love it. I think creatine is one of the most beneficial supplements. At the end of the day, though, like from a weight gain standpoint, it's not going to be like the magic bullet, if you will, right? Like, yes, it has a lot of benefits from a cognitive standpoint, from an energy production standpoint, hydration standpoint, tons of good things that it can do for you. But a lot of athletes, think, oh, I'm just going to take creatine.
That's all I need.
Right, that's all I need. I'm going to put on, 15 pounds of muscle like that. It's like, that's not how it works. Like initially, right, they might think that because they're seeing maybe anywhere from like 2 to 4 pounds of water weight initially over the first month of taking creatine, but that's not like true muscle mass or anything. They just take it. So, but yeah, absolutely recommend it. But yeah, just it's not the end all be all from a size and gain standpoint.
And we do have the Thorne one creatine.
Oh, perfect. Yep. Yeah.
Sounds like we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. From a creatine standpoint, definitely the powder over like the gummies for sure. Because creatine is not really stable in fluids. So like I think Bang energy drink, they have creatine in that, but it's literally in liquid for who knows how long since it's been produced. Like that degrades creatine pretty quick. So to get creatine into a gummy, it has to be dissolved into a liquid form and then turn into a gummy. So it's already introducing water. So like the degradation starts the moment it's being produced. So a lot of those gummies will say 1 gram of creatine per gummy when it's significantly less. So you just got to go with the real stuff.
Great.
Awesome. Anyone else? We'll have to go 1 more minute. Acid for digestion. Didn't get the first part. Was I talking about acid? Probably like probiotics, I think. Oh, maybe digestive enzymes, perhaps. Is that what you're talking about? That could be. So like certain protein powders, like Momentous whey protein. ALA, alpha lipoic acid. So that's like an antioxidant that's primarily found in like greens, so like spinach, kale, arugula, things like that. That helps the body to use like carbs as an energy source. But yeah, digestive enzymes. I mean, that's typically going to be in a supplemental form as well. There are like some high quality protein powders like Momentous protein that like already has the protein digestive enzyme included in the product. So you don't have to do like a standalone, but typically it's going to be a standalone. All right. Well, cool, guys. I'll leave you with that. Certainly, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I did drop that calendar invite in the chat here. I'll also include that when I send out the replay tomorrow morning. And then you can just, like, if you have questions, you can just reply back to any of the emails that I send, and it goes right to me. So with that, good luck with this off season. Hopefully I'll talk to a few of you here. over the next week or so. And if not, then have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.